Chronicles of Narnia: The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis. Chapter 11. The Pace Quickens. Quick as lightning, Rishta Tarkan leaped back out of the reach of the king's sword. He was no coward, and would have fought single-handed against Trinian and the dwarf if it need were, but he could not take on the eagle and the unicorn as well. He knew how eagles can fly into your face and peck at your eyes and blind you with their wings. He had heard it from his father, who had met Narnians in battle, that no man, except with arrows and a long spear, can match a unicorn, for it rears on its hind legs as it falls upon you, and then you have hoofs and torn-in teeth to deal with at once. So he rushed into the crowd and stood calling out, to me, warriors of the Tishrok, may he live forever. To me, royal old Narnians, let the wrath of Tashlan fall upon you. While this was happening, two other things happened as well. The ape had not realized his danger as quickly as the Tarkan. For a second or so he remained squatting behind the fire, staring at the newcomers. Then Trinian rushed upon the wretched creature, picked it up by the scruff of the neck, and dashed back to the stable, shouting, "Open the door! Poggin, open it! Go and drink your own medicine, shift!" said Trinian, and hurled the ape through into the darkness. But as the dwarf banged the door shut again, a blinding greenish-blue light shone out from inside the stable. The earth shook, and there was a strange noise, a clucking and screaming, as if it was a hoarse voice coming from a monstrous bird. The beast moaned and howled and called out, "Tashlan, hide us from him!" And many fell down, many hid their faces in their wings or their paws. No one except Farsight the eagle, who has the best eyes of all living things, noticed the face of Rishta Tarkan at that moment. And from what Farsight saw there, he knew at once Rishta was just as surprised and nearly frightened at everyone else. There goes one, thought Farsight, who was called on the gods he does not believe in. How will it be with him when they have really come? The third thing, which also happened at the same moment, was the really beautiful thing at night. Every single talking dog in the whole meeting, there were 50 of them, came bounding and barking joyously to the king's side. They were mostly great big dogs with thick shoulders and heavy jaws. Their coming was like the breaking of a great wave on the sea beach. It nearly knocked you down, for though they were talking dogs, they were just as doggy as they could be, and all stood up with their front paws on the shoulders of the humans, and licked their faces, all saying at once, "Welcome, welcome, we'll help, we'll help, we'll help. Show us how to help, show us how. How. It was love that had made you want to cry. This at last was the sort of thing they had been hoping for, and when a moment later several little animals, mice, moles, and a squirrel or so, came pattering up, squealing with joy, saying, See, we're here," and when after that the bear and the boar came too, Eustace feel that perhaps, after everything, he might be going to become right. But Trinian gazed around and saw how very few of the animals had moved. To me, he called. "Have you all turned to cowards since I was your king?" "We daren't," whimpered dozens of voices. "Tashlan would be angry. Shield us from Tashlan." "We're all the talking horses," said Trinian to the boar. We've seen," squealed the mice. "The ape has made them work. They're all tired, down at the bottom of the hill." "Then all you little ones," said Trinian, "you nibbers and gars and nutcrackers, away with you as fast as you can scamper to see if the horses are on our side, and if they are, get your teeth into the ropes and gnaw till the horses are free and bring them hither." "With a good will, sire," came the small voices, and with a whisk of tails those sharp-eyed, sharp-toothed folk were off. Trinian smiled for mere love as he saw them go, but it was already time to be thinking of other things. Rishta Tarkan was giving his orders. "Forward," he said. "Take all of them alive if you can hurl them into the stable or drive them into it. Then they are all and we'll put in fire and we'll make them an offering to the great god Tush." "Ha," said Farsight to himself. "So that is how he hopes to win Tush's pardon for his unbelief." The enemy line, about half of Rishta's force, was now moving forward, and Trinian had barely time to give his orders. Out on the left, Joel, and try to shoot all you may before they reach us. Bow and bear next to her. Poggin on my left, Eustace on my right. Hold the right wing, Jewel. Stand by him, Puzzle, and use your hoofs. Hover and strike, Farsight. You dogs, just behind us. Go in among them, and after the sword play has begun. Aslan to our aid." Eustace stood with his heart beating terribly, hoping that he would be brave. He had never seen anything, though he had seen both dragon and sea serpent, that made his blood run so cold as the line of a dark-faced, bright-eyed men. There were 15 Calamines, a talking bull of Narnia, Slinky the fox, and Raggle the satyr. Then he heard twing and zap on his left, and one Calamine fell. The twang and zap, and the satyr was down. "Oh, well done, daughter," came Trinian's voice, and then the enemy were upon them. Eustace could never remember what happened in the next 2 minutes. It was all like a dream, the sort you have when your temperature is over 100, until he heard Rishta Tarkan's voice calling out from the distance, "Retire! Back hither and reform!" Eustace came to his senses and he saw the Calamines scampering back to their friends. But not all of them. Two lay dead, pierced by Jewel's horn, one by Trinian's sword. Fox lay dead at his own feet and wondered if it was he who killed it. The bull was also down, the Sioux through the eye by an arrow from Joel, and gashed in his side by a boar's tusks. But our side had its losses too. 3 dogs were killed, and a fourth was hobbling behind on 3 legs and whimpering. The bear lay on the ground, moving feebly. Then it mumbled in its throaty voice, bewildered to the last. I don't understand. It laid his big head down on the grass, quietly as a child going to sleep, and never moved again. In fact, the first attack had failed. Eustace didn't seem to be glad about it. He was terribly thirsty, and his arm ached so. As the defeated Calamines went back to their commander, the dwarfs began jeering at them. "Had enough, darkies!" they yelled. "Don't you like it? Why doesn't your Tarkan go fight himself instead of sending you to be killed? Poor darkies!" "Dwarfs!" cried Trinian. "Come here and use your swords, not your tongues. He has still time. Dwarfs of Narnia, you can fight well, I know. Come back to your alliance." "Yah!" sneered the dwarfs. "Not likely. You're just as the big humbugs as the other lot. We don't want any kings. The dwarfs are for the dwarfs. Boo!" Then a drum began, not a dwarf this time, but the big bull's hiding Calamine drum. The children from the very first hated the sound. Boom, boom, ba-boom, it went. They would have hated it far worse if they had known what it meant. Trinian did. It meant that there were other Calamine troops somewhere near, and that Rishtar Khan was calling them to his aid. Trinian and Jewel looked one another sadly. They had just begun to hope that they might win that night. But it would all be over with them if a few new enemies appeared. Trinian gazed despairingly around. Several Narnians were standing with the Calamines, whether their treachery or honest fear of Tahlan. Others were sitting still, staring, not likely to join either side. But there were fewer animals now. The crowd was much smaller. Clearly several of them had just crept away quietly during the fighting. Boom, boom, ba-ba, boom, went the horrible drum. Then another sound began to mix with it. "Listen," said Joel. "Look," said Farsight. A moment later there was no doubt what it was. With a thunder of hoofs, tossing heads, widened nostrils, and waving manes, over a score of talking horses and Narnia came charging up the hill. The Gnaws and Nibblers had done their work. Pog and the dwarf and the children opened their mouths to cheer, but that cheer never came. Suddenly the air was full of the sound of twanging barrel strings and hissing arrows. It was the dwarfs who were shooting, and for a moment Jill could hardly believe her eyes. They were shooting the horses. Dwarfs are deadly archers. Horse after horse rolled over. None of those noble beasts ever reached the king. "Little swine!" shrieked Eustace, dancing in his rage. "Dirty, filthy, treacherous little brutes!" Even Jewel said, "Shall I run after those dwarfs, sire? Spit 10 of them on my horn at each plunge." But Trinian had his face stern as stone and said, "Stand fast, Jewel. If you must weep, sweetheart," this was to Jill, "turn your face aside and see not so you wet not your bowstring. And peace, Eustace. Do not scold like a kitchen girl. No warrior salts. Courteous words or else hard knocks are his only language." But the dwarf stared back at Eustace. "Was that a surprise for you, little boy, eh? Thought we were on your side, did you? No fear, we don't want any talking horses. We don't want you to win any more than the other gang. You can't take us in. The dwarfs are for the dwarfs." Rishtar Khan was still talking to his men, doubtless arranging arrangements for the next attack and probably wishing he had sent his whole force into the first. The drum boomed in. Then, to their horror, Trinian and his friends heard far faint tear as from a long way off answering drum. Another body of Calamines had heard Rishtar's signal and were coming to support him. You would have not known from Trinian's face that he had now given up all hope. "Listen," he whispered in a matter-of-fact voice. "We must attack now before yonder miscreants are strengthened by their friends. Bethink you, sire," said Poggin, "that we have the wooden wall of the stable at our backs. If we advance, shall we not encircle and get swords point between our soldiers? Between our shoulders? "I would say as you do, dwarf," said Trinian. "Were not their very plan to force us into the stable? The further we are from the deadly door, the better." "The king is right," said Farsight. "Away from this accursed stable, and whatever goblin lives inside it, at all costs." "Yes, do let's," said Eustace. "I'm coming to hate the very sight of it." "Good," said Trinian. "Now look yonder to our left. You see a great rock that gleams like white marble in the firelight. First we will fall upon these Calamines. You, maiden, shall move out on your left and shoot as fast as you ever may into their ranks, and you'll fly at their faces from the right. Meanwhile the others will be charging them. When we are so close, Jill, that you can no longer shoot at them for fear of striking us, go back to the white rock and wait. You others keep your ears wide even in the fighting. We must put them to flight in a few minutes, or else not at all, for we are fewer than they. As soon as I call back, then you rush to join Jill at the white rock, and we shall have protection behind us and can breathe a while. Now be off, Jill." Feeling terribly alone, Jill ran out at 20 feet, her right leg back, her left leg forward, and set an arrow to her string. She wished her hands were not shaking so. That's a rotten shot, she said as her first arrow sped towards the enemy and flew over their heads. But she had another string the next moment. She knew that speed was what mattered. She saw something big and black darting into the faces of the Calamines. That was Farsight. Then first one man, and then another, dropped his sword and put up both his hands to defend his eyes. Then one of her own arrows hit a man, and another hit a Narnian wolf, who had seemed to join the enemy. But she had been shooting for only a few seconds when she had to stop. With a flash of swords and the end of the bow's tusk and Jules' horn, with deep baying from the dogs, Trinian and his party were rushing on their enemies like men in 100 yards race. Jules, astonished to see how unprepared the Calamine seemed to be. She did not realize that this was the result of her work and the eagles. Very few troops can keep on holding steadily to the front if they were getting arrows in their faces from the one side, being picked by an eagle from the other. "Oh, well done!" shouted Jill. The king's party were cutting their way right into the enemy. The unicorn was tossing men as you toss hay on a fork. Then Eustace seemed to Jill, who after didn't know very much about swordsmanship, to be fighting brilliantly. The dogs were at the Calamine's throats. It was going to work. It was victory at last. With a horrible cold shock, Jill noticed a strange thing. Though the Calamines were falling at each Narnian sword stroke, they never seemed to get any fewer. In fact, there were actually more of them now that the fight began. There were more every second. They were running up from every side. They were new Calamines. These new ones had spears. There was such a crowd of them she could hardly see her own friends. She heard Trinian's voice crying, "Back! Back to the rock!" The enemy had been reinforced. The drum had done its work.